On to spiritual thought. And sorry for the repeat, but I just got to say this. I was in Fiji, and in Fiji they have this community center where all the people get together and they sit around. They had us come down and sit in a little circle, and they do this little thing where they give you kava. You ever had it before? It's like muddy water, but it's from a root that they pulverize and pound it up, and they put it in water and smush it up and right in front of you in a little bag. And they get a little bowl and they pass it around, and afterwards my entire class got a cold. I think we all just shared it with each other. We were all sick after this. But you're sitting there sipping and they pass and someone else takes this and we're all drinking this kava thing. But the point is they clap and they come over and they do this, and afterwards they come over and they embrace you. And for my little boy, they grab him in the head and they put their forehead up against him. And then they walk outside, and these people, they say this thing called bula. And bula is the word for greetings to you, my neighbor, my friend. And everybody, whether they saw me in the little cultural center or not, we went on a couple of walks through the village, and people everywhere, out their windows, hey, bula! Just all said this to me, everybody. And walking down the sidewalk, there's bula, and they want to stop and chat with you a little bit. And these are total strangers to me. I've never met anywhere. And they're happy people. They live in just, I don't know, I've been in different places. These actually are concrete. Some are concrete, some are tin, some are wood structures. But they have windows or not always, they don't always have windows. They are not the best conditions at all. They grow their food right there. They might travel off the island once or twice in a while to go to the main island of Suva here and there. Beyond that, never. That's their whole world. But these are happy, happy people. And the one thing I saw about this is they say this bula thing to each other all the time, and it just connects. And I started thinking about my neighborhood. Their little kids would run to each other's houses and stuff, and they treat each other like this. They are totally okay with this community feeling. And I thought about my neighbors. I say hi to my neighbors, but I don't ever run their house. And I spend that much time in their yard. And if I see them twice or 3 times a week, that's usually best. Most of the time at church. And I think church is a great place for the bula thing. But I would encourage all of you to go bula somebody. I think we need to do more of this in our lives. I think you just really need to make that a part of who you are. Do not be afraid to go bula somebody today. And especially if you know people who are not being bullied enough. It's the same as the word. It's the way you say it. If you bully them, not bully them, but if you bully people around you, I think they'll appreciate it. Our society needs this. All right, that's enough of that. Here is 1 second. Today's your lab day, so please come to lab. It's happening, and I'm leaving. Kai and I are leaving. What's coming with me? We're going to Yellowstone. I'm leaving at 2 o'clock right when the lab starts. But I've got Teresa Gomez coming, and she's going to be there from 2 to 4. She and Ryan Howell know more about probably Arc Pro than most people on campus. There are a few others over in geography who are pretty good with Arc Pro as well, but these guys know their business. Do you all know Teresa? She works over in the library in that facility that gives support to people who need GIS help. That is open to anybody on campus and especially to you guys. If you ever want any support, go take advantage of it. And today you can ask her about that. She's actually going to give you a little pitch on that facility, so she'll start with that. And never hesitate to go there and sit with them and get input and feedback. So it is happening today. Please come and be ready for this. Okay. 1 more second here. What do I need to pull? Let's do this. Here's Learning Suite. So today you'll be talking about Introduction to ArcGIS Pro. For some of you, this might be a bit of a review. I totally failed in yesterday's introduction to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10 how you feel about GIS. and where you're at. You want to do that really quick so I have a quick sense. I've done this in 417. It just helps me really just to get a feel for it. On a scale of 1 to 10, how you feel about your comfort level with ArcPro and GIS in general. You know this in your nick. I'm just gonna walk. You're just gonna give me a number. 2.
5.
5. 4.
10, 9,
9.6.
7,
7.
5, 5 or 6.
5.5.
3. 6. 5. 5. You finish, Ryan? 3. 6. 7. That actually is really helpful. Okay. For some of you, this will take you a short amount of time. You'll be done in 2 hours. The nice thing about this class is we've loaded you up with other things to do. So you don't have to worry. If you go to a lab, you're like, shoot, it's over already. Let's just get going. Don't worry because you've got trainings to be doing. And these trainings are happening every week. They're right here, the Esri trainings. Those are going on every week. So make sure you're paying attention to those and doing those at the same time. And the whole point behind this is the more you do this stuff, the more you're working with it, practicing, seeing new options and features, the better off you're going to be. And it's great for your resume. This is just an excellent resume builder. We will be this week doing that. We're going to talk a little bit today about scale after we finish our discussion on landscape ecology. Next time we'll be about disturbance. But then after that, on Thursday of next week, Ryan's going to give you the full experience of what it's like to be a drone pilot and how to operate drones. Then we are going to go in the field on next Thursday up in Rock Canyon to go fly, and we're going to make this a drone day. After that, your labs are going to involve images and rectification stuff related to some of the data you collected out there, but also stuff that Ryan's got from his master's thesis that's totally applicable and useful for your education and experience. These trainings go along with this. Image classification, doing different kinds of classification here, and then assessing the accuracy of those are all related. So that's kind of the upcoming few weeks of what you have in store, and then we'll go from there. Last time I asked you what rangelands were, I want to just briefly finish these thoughts. Talk about the kinds of plants, where they occur. 42% grassland, 23% shrublands, woodlands, or woodlands, tundra, desert, forest. There's all these different portions of the earth. And here's how somebody's mapped them out as far as what rangelands are. And you cannot deny that it involves a lot of land out there. And so much of the work we do involves this assessment of range environments. Man, I'll tell you what, that whole place, if you look what's not, you can't really see it that well in this. It must be on the screen. It's most of Australia is designated as range. There's a little bit on the coast over here. That is not. You can't really see that with that map. It's clear on my computer. Different portions of the United States, tallgrass prairie, man, this is just really light. Our deserts out here, the higher elevation sites, get the mountaintops, you do shift over to some forestry areas, so this is again a pretty generalized map. But it covers a big proportion of our landscape. So 40% of the earth is used for grazing. Most productive often used for domesticated animals for grazing purposes. The range of precipitation is usually a semi-arid to an arid situation, and how much rainfall they get. And soils, many of the tallgrass prairie region or mollisols, we start getting to some of our areas out here. What would be the dominant soil type out in this region where we work right here? Do we have mollisols in Utah? We will certainly do. What else do we have for the dominant? The rhizosols are all over Utah. Anything else we have?
There's aerosols.
Which ones?
Aerosols.
What are some aerosols?
more treatment stuff.
Yeah, right, right. So there's certain areas that have that. I think you're exactly right. There's certain portions of the state. But in the West, you have low precipitation. There's certain soils that really dominate. And we could have a long discussion about the nature of climatic characteristics in ecological site description data. And are you all, does that word ESDs or ecological site description mean something to everybody in this room? Let me give you a quick rundown, just really fast. The United States government, they've established what are called ecological site descriptions that are managed mostly by the NRCS, but work very closely with the BLM. The BLM really manages most of the lands out there that are in public lands in Utah. Forest Service has some of Forest Service has some of their own designations for classifying landscapes. The ESDs are developed to make it possible for you to determine the conditions or characteristics at that site. And they're usually based on what properties. If you're going to establish an ESD or ecological site description, what are the variables that are going to be used in defining that location? This matters big time. Soil type is right up there. If you look at the terminology, the naming of a soil classification for a ecological site description, soil type is going to be in it. Anything else?
Dominant vegetation.
Dominant vegetation is a part of this. And actually, if you were to rank them, I would believe the soils would be first, vegetation would be third. What's second? It's tied to that, but it's precipitation. So it's climate, specifically precipitation. You could also look at some temperature regimes, but it's mostly water availability that comes in those areas. So if you start to look at it across a landscape, especially these ranges that we're talking about, and you want to assess what's out there, and know if you're going to set the study, this is a big part of research. And I don't think this is considered nearly enough. We will go out and put out plots if we're going to compare. So if you're going to do habitat assessment or reclamation response to something, we will go out and set up our plots and start to measure data, hoping that we're consistent across a landscape. So you might be over in this PJ Woodland looking at response post-burning or fire. You do this over here and over there. But if you don't go and look at an ESD, if you don't go and investigate this, then what you might be doing is looking at a PJ Woodland that's in an area that has a different ecological site description than somewhere else. If you do that, what are the potential issues with that? If you get a totally different response, and in your thesis you're going to say, yeah, these sites we actually got a different response based on treatment. We treated that area and we didn't treat here, and there's a huge difference in the response. And it turns out that it might have had nothing to do with your treatments. It might have had only to do with the fact that this was a complete different ecological site that you just compared. And that, I'll guarantee you, I've never quantified this, but I would be afraid to even think about how many research projects, how many papers have been written, how many theses have been generated that, not saying those differences don't exist for the treatment effect, but could be influenced heavily based on site characteristics that we're not evaluating. And nowadays, you can get ESDs easily from the government, called Shane Green. He will send you a shapefile that you can upload in ArcPro, and there you go. You can see exactly where these ESDs are and find out, if I go and compare this site over to this site, in my case where horses may be, I'm grazing horses here, I'm not allowing them over there across the other side of the fence. Well, these ESDs are not the same. I don't know if I really got a viable study. So think about that as you're setting up your studies and considering the data you got for your own research. All right, there's just different types. Savannas, deserts, shrublands, woodlands, tundra, all the things that go with that. I will post these slides on Learning Suite. So in fact, I just rifle through those. You'll still have them, and don't worry about that. It's just information about them, and you can go back and review that. 78% of the world's supply of red meat is a product of natural vegetation, so we often use these lands to our own benefit, these range systems. Any idea what those are right there? There's just no way you're going to know that specific breed of sheep. Because a lot of parts of the world, they depend on agricultural lands to raise animals. And landscape variability this idea of landscape ecology and how we manage our lands and what they do, how they tie into this, is really critical. It's a very important thing. These are actually from China. These are Chinese lambs called Yanshi lambs. And for the city of Incheon in Yanshi, this is their market. That's how they make money. They harvest these lambs and produce this meat that gets sold all over that central part of China. It is a major product for them. And how that's tied into the productivity of their landscapes, their range environment, is really critical, and it's really bad right now. Their rangelands are just hammered. So there's these interactions, these interrelationships between forage and livestock and water, fish, and all these things, how they're influencing and influenced by vegetation. So it's all very tightly interwoven. So the ideas of range management to protect renewable resources, to maintain vegetation that's in good condition, have soil, water, and assess and evaluate the multiple uses of landscapes and products that come from rangeland environments. Any idea where that might be?
Oregon. Fields, Oregon.
God's country.
Yeah, that is in eastern Oregon and God's country. Okay, two major things. I went to a horse conference, actually not a conference, I went to speak with the advisory board for the Wild Horse Program a couple times. They want to know what horses, if it's an issue or not to have so many horses or not. There's usually uninformed people who work for who are not for the government, they're giving advice to the government. That's what their job is. I tell them, here's what you got to know. You're talking about managing rangelands, it's about precipitation and soils. If you do not have a good understanding of those and the effect of herbivory on these systems, you're going to get in trouble really quick. Now, this right here is a really cool area. This is in central Australia. And what they do here is they like to graze animals as well. But they also turn loose a whole bunch of horses and camels and cows. And they come through and they'll graze this stuff out. And so you end up with this right there. This is called spinifex. The spinifex is amazing. It's such a cool grass. The grass does these large bunches like this, and they can be huge. And the fact is if I were to have you walk up there and I said, just give that thing a little pat, just touch it like that hard. And you'd lift your hand up and you'd have 20 or 30 little red dots on your hand, which are punctures from blood emerging out of your hand. So these things evolved to just resist grazing. And this is what's left behind. So you'll see the landscapes. You'll see aerial photographs of central Australia. You'll think, oh, that place is totally greened up. Here's this red rock here, canopy with these little rock cliffs. This is the outback. This outback looks so much like this wherever you drive around in it. And that plant right there was a stab that the jeepers out of you. True? Sister Myrick, you probably got poked by it a few times yourself.
No, we were hiking.
Yep, hiking right through it. So, how plants persist, gradient, and annual precipitation drives some of the things we see in these lands. The history and how that's affected these landscapes is also really important to understand this. And I asked somebody yesterday if they knew Bruce Roundy, and some of you know, some of you don't know Bruce Roundy. But he studied these responses of the environment and impacts, disturbances to the environment for a long time. And he and I used to have a lot of conversations about this thought of how well do you know the history of what's happened to the lands where you work in. Wherever you're at, if the more information you can dig up about the past will help you understand what's happened there and how that's affected what you're seeing there currently. Where I did my PhD research, which was in Eastern Oregon, it was a place a lot like Utah where in the turn of the century they had hundreds of thousands of sheep and they just moved across the landscape, eating basically everything until it was completely chewed up and gone, and then move on, and before you know it, they kind of work their way back and picking what was left. And Lee Edelman, who was an ecologist who was like our Kim Harper, that you probably have no idea who that is, but he was also a BYU professor here. And these guys are amazing. They're so amazing. But Lee Edelman from Oregon State, he said, he sat at my study site with me out in the Steens Mountains of Oregon. He said, just so you know, what you're seeing here in your planning community you're measuring is all an artifact of what was left behind from 1910. The fact that you still have, in some areas, a little bit of the Stuca idolensis. Who is that? I Rhino fescue. He says that thing is very grazable. And in some areas, it should be all over these areas in here. And I'm seeing a few little remnant patches that got left behind. That's still an artifact of what got left after this got beaten to death by a misunderstanding, I guess. I don't know. I totally get this. I refuse to just sit there and hammer on people because of grazing behavior in the past. They were doing their best to make a living. This is what they understood. They did this stuff because that's what they thought was how you market animals and produce. But the effect of that kind of pattern of the land is it had a pretty hard impact. So we don't even let the grazing of sheep today is not like it used to be. Cows relatively stable, same amount, but not sheep. So there it is. This is in Utah. 1920s to 1960s, there's your sheep and ewes, lambs production. It's just tapered down to this. It's just because it's not sustainable. We probably could do more now, but I think the market's not all that great anymore for sheep. Invasive species, how they impact these lands, huge. Weed explosion, 40% per year, 1,800 hectares a day in much of these different landscapes are being impacted by weeds. Here's a slug of them. Someone here deal a lot with cheatgrass. You ever heard of Medusa head? I think Medusa head can stomp, destroy, beat up. In a boxing match, it takes cheatgrass down. That stuff is so aggressive. I've been to places where it's a thatch. They just grow this thatchy network, and there's nothing else except for Medusa head. It is just violent. These musters and these forbs can get in and occupy a site, and that's what they become. If you ever go to Winnemucca, you know what I'm saying. Winnemucca is just, that's just a heaven for cheatgrass, man. Who loves it there. What would that be? Talking about fragmentation and the way our landscapes get used these days. Who wants to speak on behalf of this and sage-grouse? What do you want to say about that? Anybody in this room want to say something about this and sage-grouse? There have been dozens of papers that have been written on this topic. That is Wyoming. Turns out that a lot of the natural gas, oil, fracking they do in Wyoming is laid right around top of sage-grouse country. It's just like sage-grouse can smell it or something, because they're right on top of this stuff. And so they keep doing this because we love our non-renewables. We love them. These are constant. We're driving our nice cars around. So we just polka dot this landscape with this. But all the reports I've ever seen about sage-grouse is they do not like this, and they will. It's actually done kind of a staggering phase effect where they slowly, gradually work their way out further and further away from these disturbance patches that are from mining sites like this. And that Rollins, Wyoming, out in what they call the Adobe Town complex, they've got horses there. They have thousands of sage-grouse, and they won't stick around here. All the scientists I've ever met know that are working out in this area all show the same thing. They just are not doing well with that. So landscapes, expanse of scenery, land forms in the region of an aggregate. Thinking about landscape, we do a landscape ecology and how it's an aggregate of a variable distribution of plant communities and soil types and climatic patterns, how they're associated with each other. The fundamental traits of a specific geographic area, including its biological composition, physical environment, and anthropogenic or social patterns define a landscape. It's just very well thought out. It's this conglomerate of different components and aspects of the world around us and how they interrelate. We use the word juxtaposition, how close things are associated to each other and how those interact is a big part of landscape ecology and what this class is all about. It's just the term ecology, relation of the animal to both its organic and inorganic, from Haeckel, one of the considered the father of ecology. Study of the structure and function of nature, the scientific study of the distribution and abundance of organisms, and so on. We have all these definitions that describe this relationship of biotic and abiotic parts of an environment, right? How they interrelate to each other, how they compete or get along, or use the resources that are there. So this term precisely describe the study of the distribution patterns, and this came from that landscape ecology book. This is Monica Turner's best definition. The study of the distribution patterns of communities and ecosystems, the ecological processes that affect those patterns, and changes in pattern process over time. It's just so, there's so many words right there that this could be a whole book on just this statement right there, what this means. And that's what it is. Study of the distribution of all these different elements of an environment and how they interact and create these patterns that we see, both spatially and temporally. And in the literature, if you want to be cool and get your paper published quickly, a great buzzword. This is the buzzword. I've tried it several times in my papers, and it never gets flack. Never get flack. There may be a hyphen. Sometimes I see with the hyphen, sometimes not. That is a buzzword. Spatiotemporal, which means it considers both space and time, and that is, just throw it in there. If you're talking about reclamation of seeds that have been coated, just once in a while toss in spatiotemporal, and people are like, let's publish this. This is what we think about anymore. And I think you all recognize the relevance of this in whatever you're doing. It's hard to find a study that in our field of environment, natural resource management, where these issues of space, how space and over time, how they matter, right? They matter so much in what we do for multiple scales. I'll talk to you in a second about scales. Another term here, landscape ecology emphasizes the interaction between spatial pattern and ecological processes. That is, the cause and consequences of spatial heterogeneity across a range of scales. And Turner made that comment. So who wants to take a stab at this thought? It keeps saying pattern and process. What is that? What does this mean, pattern and process? You can think of a way to describe it or give an example. I'm ready.
Well, it says in the upper one, it says that affect those patterns and changes in pattern process over time. So I guess like using your example earlier of like the road being put in the middle of whatever habitat it was, that changes the pattern now for that area. So those patches of habitat, for lack of better terms, are going to change in their process of how they interact with one another. Yes.
Very good. Very, very good. Anybody else? Mitch?
I think it's kind of getting at, a lot of times we think stuff can be fairly harmless, like, oh, we just put a road in, or we put a gate in, or whatever. But sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes those decisions, management decisions, developments, whatever, can have deep reaching impacts that we don't see for years. You know, I think dams are a good example of that. Like, back in the day, people were just trying to divert water so they could farm mostly, or have water to drink or whatever. But we look at it now and we realize, like, holy cow, like, this is changing everything. You know, fish can't migrate. It's, you know what I mean? Like, there are lots
Absolutely
of
right.
things that processes and those patterns were changed by one little thing, or one big thing.
Yeah. Awesome comment. Really good. Think of the next picture of like the Beaver Dam, pattern and process. Get back. So you just think about this situation right here, that you see these certain patterns across space and time again that show up. And all of a sudden here, you have to wonder what is driving this right here. You've got this natural system that's coming through. You've got a watershed that's producing a water flow. At some point, it's going surface. If the water goes to the surface and down below again, you know what they call that? If it goes below ground and back up again, we call it hyporheic flow. In this case, you've got floats down, it's on the surface, it means it got dammed up. Here's an inlet, dammed it up. And all of a sudden now, what used to be potentially sagebrush has just been modified because that water table has just shifted. And the processes that take place now, as far as multiple aspects of this, you can think about how light is being captured and produced into photosynthetic material is producing glucose for energy production. It's just increased dramatically because a little dew down here is built down. And the species composition right here is way, way different, which means the competition and relationships between these plants in here has also shifted drastically as well. Over time, how that persists and the successional patterns relate to this are all driven by this interrelationship up to here, and then right there at that fringe, all of a sudden you see juniper growing on these foothills of sagebrush that are not down here at all. They're all real distinctive patterns. The funny thing about that is so much that's tied to one little animal that just swam in here and did this. Right? It's crazy. One creature has completely modified this entire system and how it functions. So I think the point I'm trying to make is that they're really complicated. So Mitch, you're right, you've got this relationship that's complicated. There's so many different factors that go on. That's why we like this field so much. Because you can study, you can take a class of soils and realize, oh my gosh, man, soils make such a huge difference in everything goes on up there. And then you take a study in plants and plant interactions, and man, it's just so critical. Then also this interaction of that and the ungulates that are using it, they're all so intertwined. Pretty darn amazing. Here's that word juxtaposition. Landscape ecology emphasizes the relationship between pattern and process, juxtaposition and arrangement of ecosystems on a landscape. And so a lot of the tools we use, like I told you about Monica Turner, I asked her, I said, so tell me what kind of stuff you do with remote sensing and GIS. And she said, I actually don't. I don't work at all with those. And I thought, I had no idea that she was going to say that. She was really into just studying plant community characteristics across space and how they shift. But she's not at all into the equipment that does the measuring of it. But man, I feel like your labs having you get experience in GIS, remote sensing, that is such a cool way of measuring and quantifying these patterns, the juxtaposition of one element or one vegetation type, one class, how it relates to one next to it, the next to it. It matters so much. We'll talk about neural networks a little bit and about energy flow. And all these things are so tied into this word of juxtaposition and how that relationship affects long-term spatio-temporal patterns. In landscape ecology, scale is extremely important, and we'll get to that in a second. It's not a distinctive discipline or simply a branch of ecology, but rather a synthetic intersection of many related disciplines that focus on the spatio-temporal pattern of the landscape. Clear back in the 80s, they're getting this thing figured out to understand that concept. I had an argument with one of my dear friends from Oregon State, who was a fellow PhD student. He said, landscape ecology is not a field. This is not a discipline. I'm like, bull crap, I just majored in that. He says, I don't care, it's not. And he and I battled over this for so long. He says, you tell me what your landscape ecology feels any different than my ecology discipline. And I battled with him. I still think I won, but he's convinced that he just dominated me that day. Why? How is this any different than what you're studying when you're studying ecology? From everything I just told you, if you're in a class now called landscape ecology, I have to defend this title. What would you say are the elements that separate this class from range ecology? And you're in it, right? Somehow you signed up for this class because you thought there was something different. You wanted to take ecology, but you couldn't take this one. I know. I know it's not fair for me to bag on it. Serious. See, again, record that. Craig Carr. It's a battle.
Are you asking like the difference between what Professor Roundy taught and what you
Sure.
teaching?
Yes.
Like his class.
I want to know why you think this class is different from Bruce Randy's ecology class.
Well,
So everything I just told you, Bruce Randy could have talked about the same thing. He probably did.
he made me tell these
Yeah.
things.
So then how's it different?
But I don't know. I don't know if this is the answer you're looking for. I don't know what you're looking for, but I mean, like Bruce in his class, he just talked about most of the sheep interactions and like the history of rangeland ecology and how it came to be and the importance of. He talked about bison herds. He talked about how they affected the tallgrass prairie, and then he talked about just how humans have impacted rangelands with grazing and what we're doing today with that whole interaction. But
Beautiful.
I don't know.
I kind of gave a
I feel
similar
like-
rundown.
Yeah, yours is like
So-
a really fast version of his. You added GIS. I don't.
Okay, so I did GIS. This class, it could be like ecology and GIS, but I think there's more to it than this. I want you to help me pinpoint why this class exists.
Well, I was actually just talking to Melissa about this the other day because as an undergrad, I took Dr. Becker's landscape ecology class, and the whole semester I thought it was really stupid that it was a class. And I fought him on it. I was like, there's absolutely, I don't like, I have some sort of disdain toward Monica Turner because I was like, I fought him on it. I was like, this is just geography, and you call it like biogeography. That's just, in my head, that's all I thought. And so I was telling Melissa, I was like, it's kind of ironic that I'm working with you now because I like,
Because you bad mouth me so
I
much
totally
before.
hated landscape ecology. I thought it was, I mean, like, I love the content, but I was just like, this shouldn't be a different branch.
Yeah.
But I did learn that I feel like scale is the biggest thing because when you're looking at, like, landscape ecology really does pinpoint, so like, you know, a grasshopper's perspective on a patch is different from what we would see as a patch, you know, and their, you know, what their corridor might be. It's just looking at different levels of the ecological processes is just going to be a little bit more specific, I feel like.
Okay, you just said several things I would throw there as well, right? Scale is absolutely on that list. So that's a main focus, is scale. Talk a lot about scale because that's a main driver of things. And it belongs in ecology, but it's a focus in landscape ecology. We talk a lot about scale. And how that actually influences the outcome of your study based on how you look at it. Anything else? Which corridors? Distribution, shape. We'll talk about when we do our lab in here on frag stats. We're going to talk about shape and patch density and patch diversity and how you measure those and what they mean and how that drives what can be seen in a location like that. So patterns, patches, and processes are all buzzwords that are a landscape ecology buzzword, and that's where I still want to argue with Craig Carr. I think those matter as a separate real emphasis that's given to those thoughts. The tools that are used to quantify them and using spatial analysis. There's a whole branch, and you know this, you're watching this, you're right in the middle of it. Because I'm watching it too. There is a wide branch and movement of spatial analysis in our fields. It is happening. We are using satellite imagery all the time. In my horse conference, some people brought up, we use Landsat imagery to quantify and classify the reflectance characteristics of the surface so we can identify where we think wild asses of Asia are going and why they're going there. It's no longer just a question of, and at what scale can you detect that? And those are landscape ecology questions, in my opinion. Anybody else want to argue for or against? Maybe with that. That's why I left with Greg Carr. He still doesn't think it's a difference, but I do. The emergence of landscape ecology as a discipline has catalyzed as a shift in paradigms among ecologists, resource managers, and land use planners, having now seen the face of the spatial pattern and scale. We can never go back in the way we view things. I like Wayne's comment here. But once you start looking at that relationship of how things are distributed across space and time, drives what overall outcomes you see in the nature of how they are. And once you go there, you're not going to go back. Okay, a couple more things I want to say that we can say in the hour we have left, 5 minutes we have. Here are the three primary aspects that differentiate landscape ecology from other disciplines: the consideration of spatial patterns and ecological processes, distinguishes landscape ecology from traditional ecological studies. Landscape ecology often focuses on much larger spatial extents, and I'm going to be careful to say this because the next slides I'm going to show you talks about large and small. Be very careful the way you use those words. Right? What's a large scale thing? What's a small scale thing? Be careful on that because that will confuse people. And landscape ecology is closely tied to planning management and decision support systems. So true. And there's Australia. Spring, summer, here's spring, summer. You can see what happens. You can use tools like AVHRR, Advanced Very High Resolution Radiometer. There's a satellite image that's buzzing around, taking pictures of the Earth. You can look at this and say, oh, here we go. That's what happens when you compare those two sites at different times of the year. Look at that over here. These little parts that are greened up, that shifts a lot. In the central part of it, you start to get some areas that become more drought in the summertime. You can detect that with these tools. Then that spatial pattern over time tell you a lot. You can learn a lot from something like that. This is kind of old, but I like the fact it's automated. Back in the 90s they did this, but a little run through watching the United States shift during each month of the year using this advanced very high resolution radiometer. NDVI, we'll talk about that. It's a naturalized difference vegetation index. It detects shifts in reflectance in the red and infrared wavelengths of light. We'll talk about that more later. But the fact is, this Earth and this planet right here, United States, North America, it's going through a constant shift. Every month, nationwide, there's stuff going on ecologically that's driven by where it's located, latitude, longitude, or latitude, elevation-wise, shift of air masses. We can talk about air movement, how it drives what goes on in these sites. Where's the water? Where's the water coming from that's causing this place out here to be so dang green all the time? You know? Yeah, you got polar continental, you have polar maritime, you also have tropical maritime coming up, and they're getting hit, especially this area down there. This is all polar maritime, this is tropical maritime. There's so many air movements that are pushing tons of water and gets pushed inland. You don't have large mountain ranges that are draining them out like we did have out here. And so you just get deciduous forest. So cool. Here's Landsat, looking at geology of the Earth. That right there, you know what that is? I was there that day. You know what that is? Okay, we don't care what it is. It's a riparian area. That's a riparian strip. How did I get that image? Drone, right? Drones. I took this image, that picture was taken right there in 2003. 2003 I took this picture. How many drones did you have in 2003? So that's your hint. This was not a drone. It's a great, nowadays I would wholly use a drone and I'd get something like this and better. But what did I use in 2003?
Hot air
It's not a, what'd you say? Hot air balloons is closer to the edge. This right there is a shadow of the balloon. But it's not a balloon, this is a shadow. That is a helium balloon. So we go get a big canister of helium, fill this sucker up. That thing right there is about as long as this table. I'm not kidding, maybe a little bit less. From here to that table, that's how long it was. And this tall. And we had the string right there. You can see how it's tethered down. So we're over there holding it down here, and this is the angle you get to see from where it's attached to the balloon. And we held it. We walked over the riparian area and had a little control down here. It has this little gyroscope mechanism. Get it in place and click. Move our balloon. Click. And away we went. So awesome. Look at the resolution of that data. I can see grasses. I can even see a fish right there swimming up. The cost of helium to do this was hundreds of dollars every time we went out. Hundreds just to get a shot like this. And today, that's our bird right there. No more helium. We've got this upstairs in the lab. I shine my laser right at his face, but he's put hours and hours, and David Birchfield has hours flying this thing. They're like magic. You're going to find out next week. These are like, you'll see it, you'll fly this next week. It's like magic. There we are out in the range. That's who that is. Dr. Jensen. I'm going to let you guys go. That's Dr. Jensen. And there's some real cowboys. Look at that guy with the beard. He's a real cowboy. These ranchers, these land managers are using this stuff these days. There's our little Phantom 4 Advanced. And you'll probably fly this Phantom next time as well. We have a Mavic. And that's what we get. This is his picture right there. That dude right there in the back corner took this shot right here with, actually it's so long. All right, you guys, we'll talk about scale next time, then get on to some other stuff.